everybunny, I'm Zenith variant GAY25, although my friends call me Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of buns, and welcome to Bun Plays, where a cute bunny VTuber plays video games in order to educate and entertain her audience of bunnies. And also so I can one day eventually play every video game in the world. Look, I'm a ghost bunny and we don't need to rest. So while the rest of my buns are all asleep, it's time to record some more footage, be it for games or something else. With that out of the way, welcome to the very first episode of Bun Plays and the start of my gaming journey. The journey of 1,000 games begins with a single step. So let's take that step as we dive into the world of Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, I thought we'd start with something simple for the first Bun Plays, and Sonic fits the bill perfectly in my eyes. However, before we begin the Let's Play, I thought it prudent to give my audience a bit of a primer on the game itself and my history with the franchise, since many of my bunnies want to know how much Sonic knowledge I have under my belt, and plenty of others are staring at me wondering just what a Sonic is because they aren't familiar with the franchise whatsoever, or they grew up with a Nintendo instead. With all of this in mind, consider this episode a complete primer on Sonic the Hedgehog and a lead-in to the first game. If you are already familiar with the blue blur and aren't interested in my history, feel free to skip to the next video, but for everybody else, it's time to dive into some history. The Haunted Gaming Library is now open, so sit down, get comfortable, and get ready to take some notes. This is the Sonic the Hedgehog 1991 Primer. Sonic the Hedgehog is an interesting franchise for me because it spawned not as a standalone idea, but as an answer to a juggernaut that already existed, Mario. Yahoo! Mario got his start in 1981 as Nintendo's mascot with the Donkey Kong arcade series, although back then he was known as Jumpman since he had to jump over barrels in order to stop the titular Donkey Kong and save his girlfriend Pauline. Fun fact, Jumpman was renamed to Mario as a nod to Shigeru Miyamoto's landlord at the time, Mario Segali, whose name you can't spell without Sega.
Coincidence? I think not!
In any case, while it was a very simple premise and didn't contain any real story to speak of, considering it was an arcade title, Donkey Kong and Mario were the mascots for the series and were featured prominently on every arcade cabinet. This ensured that audiences knew who both of these mascots were, and that continued throughout the 80s as they both appeared in Game & Watch games, and Mario spinned off into his own series with the arcade title Mario Brothers, where he competed against a second player who controlled his brother Luigi. Mario Brothers is a very simple game in which you hit POW blocks to knock turtles onto their backs and compete to see who gets the highest score. Much like Donkey Kong, it was a simple arcade premise with not much depth to it, but the sheer presence of Mario in all of these games turned him into a household name. Even during the arcade crash of 1983, Nintendo was doing quite well with these cabinets and established Mario as a presence in the lives of children. In 1983, Nintendo switched over to the home market with the release of the Famicom game system ignoring the crashing arcade market and creating a market of their own where children could get their parents to buy systems and pay a larger sum of money for lasting entertainment that they can enjoy in their own living room. This proved to be a huge hit in Japan, and in 1985, the Famicom was released in America as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES for short, where Mario once again began dominating the market. The initial pack-in title for most NES owners was a combo pack of Duck Hunt, which was a light hunt game where you shoot ducks, although most of us shot the laughing dog instead, and Super Mario Bros., the next evolution of the Mario series. Instead of being an arcade game with focus on high scores and looping level designs, Super Mario Bros. Was a straight-up platformer that had set stages and worlds to complete. There was still a score you could keep track of, but the focus was on getting to the end of the game as the platforming got harder and harder to complete the farther you got in the game. This philosophy proved to be the correct move, as Super Mario Bros. Soon became the big name on school playgrounds. I remember when I was growing up, and all of my friends were playing the game, and we took turns getting through each world as Player 1 and Player 2. Mario was everywhere at that time, and he would only get bigger as time went on. Super Mario Bros. 2, released in 1988, a game that was drastically different from the first, for reasons that I'll save for another day, followed by Super Mario Bros. 3 in 1990, which was a huge release. It debuted in the 1989 movie The Wizard, and blew us all away because of just how new it was.
Super Mario Brothers 3!
Granted, I hadn't seen the movie at the time, only just seeing it this year in fact, but I was given the game as a Christmas present, and I was blown away. I'll talk more about this when I get to playing Super Mario on this show, but this was a big deal. This was the game that I would play after school every day, and I absolutely adored it to pieces. It followed the same conventions of the first game, but it updated everything to be so smooth and modern, and I was just so enamored by it. With all of this in mind, Mario was a huge deal back then. He was everywhere. He completely dominated the 80s, from arcade cabinets to console games. He was in TV shows, handheld Game & Watch games, and there was a Super Mario Bros. Movie already in development. Mario was the idol of the decade, with merchandise everywhere, and Nintendo becoming the king of this console generation over Atari and plenty of other home console manufacturers, including Sega, who is the subject of this primer. Now, Sega had been in business for a very long time, dating back to the 1940s, although at the time they were known as Standard Games. Established by American businessmen Martin Bromley, Irving Bromberg, and James Humpert, their primary service at the time was introducing coin-operated amusement systems to military bases, including slot machines and other such gambling devices, much like Konami is doing today with their pachinko machines. After World War II ended in 1945, the original founders sold Standard Games and established Service Games of Japan instead, named after the military focus. After slot machines were outlawed in US territories in 1952, Bromley quickly pivoted to slot machines in US bases, in Japan, and other territories outside the US, with their company name being shortened to Sega on some slot machines as early as 1954. However, in 1960, Service Games of Japan was dissolved due to notoriety arising from investigations from the US government into criminal business practices. Just damn. No wonder Sega created the Yakuza franchise several decades later. These guys were straight up mafia.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Because of this, Bromley established two new businesses to take over its business activities: Nihon Goraku Busan, or Japan Entertainment Productions, and Nihon Kikai Seizo. The two companies purchased all of Service Games of Japan's assets, with Kikai Seizo doing business as Sega Inc., focusing on producing slot machines. Goraku Busan, doing business as Ultimatic Inc., served as a distributor and operator of coin-operated machines such as jukeboxes. The companies merged again in 1964, retaining the Nihon Goraku Busan name. However, a year later they acquired Rosen Enterprises.
By my calculations, this is a head. What? What do you want from me? I don't know the guy!
A company that was importing coin-operated games into Japan, and their name was changed to Sega Enterprises. David Rosen, an American officer in the US Air Force, was the owner of Rosen Enterprises and became the CEO of Sega, shifting their focus from military bases and slot machines, instead focusing on pinball machines, jukeboxes, and gun games by Midway Manufacturing. Now, I'm just gonna stop right here and just let that all soak in, because that is just a whirlwind of crazy right there. That said, I can't find any information about Martin Bromley past this point, aside from criminal charges and convictions. In 1947, he had one conviction for possession of illegal gambling devices, and in 1948, he was arrested for robbery, in addition to whatever happened that forced Service Games of Japan to dissolve in the first place. Bromley was most certainly a gangster, bringing in Americans to operate and expand his businesses to Japan using military bases. One of these employees was Richard Stewart, who ran Ultimatic Inc. and later became president of Sega under Rosen. So, we have a mobster from America starting an enterprise in Japan, dissolving it into two companies, and then merging it back into Sega. This all seems very suspect to me. I mean, I don't know too much about business, but the liquidation and reacquisition of assets doesn't seem very legal to me, even if Bromley was out of the picture. The way Sega just broke into multiple parts and reformed just seems weird and kinda sketchy, especially the way they kept changing their name, and yet still kept the illegal production of slot machines in other countries, and that's a whole other issue. This is a lot, and we haven't even gone to them as a game company. My buns, Sega was built upon illegal activity, and that just is fascinating to me because of how things will go in later years. Against all odds, Rosen managed to turn Sega around due to importing secondhand machines and manufacturing flippers and guns for its imported light games. Sega even began to develop their own games as a result, including Periscope, a submarine simulator that was released in the late 60s. The worldwide success of Periscope led to a technological renaissance in the arcade industry with a wave of audio-visual style games, and it seemed as if Sega was finally on top again. Unfortunately, due to rampant piracy, Sega was forced to stop exporting its games in 1970, and in 1969 Sega was sold once again to the American conglomerate Gulf and Western Industries. So after a decade of success, they were starting from scratch again, although Rosen remained CEO of the company while this story continued. It seemed like Sega couldn't catch a break due to the rapidly changing gaming market and changing gambling laws, but they were not out of the picture just yet. In 1974, Sega was reformed by Gulf and Western, focusing not on gambling machines or pinball games, but instead the newly forming video arcade game market, starting with Pongtron, a clone of Atari's 1972 hit. Yeah, I know everyone was releasing Pong at this time, but between gambling and constantly selling their business, I never expected Sega to get their big break from copyright infringement. Still, this put Sega back on the map, and they hit it big with the late 70s arcade boom, boasting revenues of over $200 million, a far cry from before. While they had some competition from Taito's Space Invaders, Sega was one of the top 5 arcade game manufacturers in the US by the early 80s, especially after licensing Frogger in 1981, which was another big hit. At the same time, the arcade crash was right around the corner, and Sega didn't have any noticeable mascots to keep their brand afloat. Sure, they had hits with stuff like Frogger, but they didn't have anything identifiable that could market their games outside of the arcade, so the arcade crash hit them hard. Gulf and Western sold its North American arcade manufacturing organization and the licensing rights for its arcade games to Bally Manufacturing, and Hayao Nakayama, then president of Sega, shifted its focus to the home consumer market of Japan. While their first system, the SG-1000, ended up selling 160,000 units, more than twice what they expected at the time, it was still outpaced by the Famicom. Part of this was because they didn't have as many recognizable faces in their lineup, but also because Sega was hesitant to work with third-party companies at the time. This is rather ironic in hindsight, considering what happened with the Nintendo Wii, but at that time, Nintendo allowed a bunch of third-party companies to publish for the Famicom, and that was a huge success because they didn't allow these third-party developers to publish on any other hardware, meaning Sega had to produce their own games once again. As time went on, Rosen stepped down as CEO of Sega, and Nakayama replaced him and began working on the Mark III, or the Sega Master System, as we know it in America. The Sega Master System was released in Japan in 1985 and 1986 in North America, where it wasn't doing so well. Despite being more powerful than the NES, it was quite unsuccessful at launch due to poor marketing and game support. Because many third-party companies were still with Nintendo, Sega decided to publish their own games and market the Master System as a toy similar to the NES. They partnered with Tonka to make use of their expertise in the toy industry, but poor marketing from Tonka critically hurt sales of the Master System in America, and production stopped in 1992. The Sega luck seemed pretty poor at the moment. However, the late 80s saw the arcade market revived and better than ever before, with Sega becoming one of the most recognized arcade brands of the late 80s because in the arcades, Sega released a wide variety of games. In 1988, Sega released the successor to the Master System, the Mega Drive, although it was once again overshadowed by Nintendo, who had released Super Mario Bros. 3 just a week earlier. The Mega Drive struggled to compete against the Famicom, and struggled against the Super Famicom in Japanese sales. For the North American launch, where the system was renamed the Genesis, Sega had no sales or marketing division, and Atari declined an offer to market the console in the region. It must have felt as if Nintendo had it out for Sega, because this is when Sega came up with an idea to put them back on top. They would directly challenge Nintendo with their marketing campaign and put them on blast with their blast processing. Indeed, Sega appeared personally attacked by just how well Nintendo was doing and created marketing slogans such as "Genesis does what Nintendo don't" and "Welcome to the next level," implying that the Genesis ran circles around the competition with their quote-unquote blast processing. Yeah, while blast processing did technically exist, it's mostly just a buzzword. All it really meant was that the system was twice as fast as its rival system, but that didn't equate to much for the actual games. The graphics were around the same quality, but they wanted to prove their hardware was indeed better and faster, so they created their own mascot Sonic to utilize this blast processing and take down that nasty Mario. Sonic's whole focus as a character was to be hip and cool, faster than the competition, and the complete antithesis to Mario. Mario ran and jumped over pits? Oh yeah? Well, Sonic is way faster, runs through loops, and can jump over multiple pits if you're quick enough. Take that, Nintendo! Mario doesn't really have character, but he's family friendly. Screw that noise, Sonic has an attitude and embodies the extreme nature of the 90s. Mario jumps on his enemies, well, Sonic does that too, but he does that in style.
What are you doing? No! Not the Mario doll! Hook up to the battery table coaster, Dad!
Welcome to Sonic marketing time. Yeah, if you couldn't tell from the marketing slogans, they had it out for Nintendo, and every commercial for Sonic was a diss track for Mario. Like, imagine Mario is the NWA, and Sonic is the Chronic. That's what Sega was doing. And while the Genesis wasn't immediately successful, the massive popularity of Sonic the Hedgehog eventually led to the Genesis outselling its competition nearly 2-1. Sorry, Easy, move over, there's a new doctor out here, and Dre is ready to dominate. A large part of this success was Sega cutting the price point of the Genesis and replacing the bundled game Altered Beast with Sonic, making the Genesis the system to have at the time. Yeah, I was not one of those Sega kids, unfortunately. When I was young, I was given an NES and an SNES for Christmas gifts, but I never owned a Sega system. I think part of it was the attitude of Sonic from the marketing campaigns, but also my dad got motion sick from playing video games. The only game he would sit down and play with me was Super Mario Bros. 1, but other than that, he couldn't play with me because he would get seriously sick. I don't think you would even be able to process all that blast with how fast Sonic was going across the screen. I would eventually get a PlayStation for a later Christmas gift, shifting my focus to Sony, so I never owned the Blue Blur, and to this day, I have never owned a Sega. However, with that being said, it was a sound investment in any case because the PlayStation played CDs. I was really into Crash Bandicoot at the time, and it had games for the family to enjoy, but I always wondered what it was like to own a Genesis. At the same time, my cousin, who was 1 year younger than me, got a Genesis for Christmas, and we would always go to his house for holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. So I did get a very quick chance to play the very first Sonic the Hedgehog, but I wasn't very good at it, and I wasn't allowed to play very long. My parents wanted us both to socialize during family holidays, and playing games with my cousin wasn't social enough for them for some reason. I do remember loving the music, but being bad at the game, since I didn't have enough time to get used to the controls, which were very different from the NES and the SNES. Oddly enough, I have more memories playing Aladdin and The Lion King for the Genesis back then, but I really wanted to play Sonic. Years later, I bought myself a PS3 and was shocked to find Sonic 1 available on the PSN store. While I did remember playing some Sonic games on GameCube and PS2, this was the first real game I completed in the franchise. I had mixed feelings then, but today is a new day. So let's sit down and play some Sonic, shall we? Just to be clear, I'll be playing the recent Sonic Origins release of the first game, which makes some noteworthy additions to the game that we can discuss in depth as we proceed. So, without any further ado, welcome my friends to Bun Plays, where I conquer the gaming world one step at a time. I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of buns, and I hope to see you all next time as we move at the speed of sound and answer a very important question. Was Sonic really as good as the hype made him out to be? Have a good one, everybody!